So on to tonight. Well, we're very pleased to welcome back author, past president of the Astrological Lodge in London, holder of the Charles Harvey Award for services to astrology, Bernard Eccles. Some of you will be familiar with Bernard just from attending our talks because he's been a regular attendee and contributor to our discussions. And he's spoken to our group many times over the years. So this evening, Bernard will be sharing his latest research and ideas about Venus in the natal chart. So welcome, Bernard, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the phases of Venus then. Does being born as Lucifer or Hesperus actually make a difference? When Graham asked me to do this, I thought, oh, this won't be any problem, because he said, would you do a talk? And I'd got a little talk all worked up about Mercury. And then a couple of months ago, you had Darby do a talk about Mercury. And I thought, oh, that's okay, I'll do the same thing for Venus. But when I came to look at it, and I've been working on this for quite a long time now, I can tell you, several weeks, I realized that there was a lot deeper to go with Venus, and also that the usual sources are surprisingly faint on Venus. You know, you delve into your books and you think, what have people said? And what they've said is very little. So I thought, this really needs me to roll up my sleeves here and do some work. So this is very much a kind of a work in progress, and it's got a lot of new ideas in it, and we can discuss them afterwards. You can shoot me down in flames if you like. But let's start with the title, Phases, Lucifer, Hesperus. I'm sure you all know what I mean, but if you don't know what I mean, let me define the terms, so to speak. Venus, in this lovely composite picture, which has been taken from Sky and Telescope's website, actually has phases. You see it as a bright thing in the sky, and perhaps you don't look at it carefully enough, or if you looked at it through binoculars, you really don't need a lot of magnification. And if you are long-sighted, you can probably make it out for yourself that Venus occurs in different forms over its cycle. And when it first occurs low in the sky, although you see it as a point of light, it is actually a crescent. And you know, there it is from behind the sun, and as it gets closer towards the Earth, and the sun's over here somewhere, what you see is the illuminated bit of it. And so it changes size, and it also changes its appearance. And if you've only just seen it as a point of light, it might be surprising to you that you know, it actually has phases and tends to resemble the moon in that way. The idea of a crescent Venus. This is apparently one of the things that Galileo first saw when he put together his first telescope, the fact that Venus had phases, which amazed him. That and the rings of Saturn. And if you haven't tried it and you've got a pair of, you know, bird watching binoculars or something like that, if you can keep them nice and steady and look at Venus, you will see it probably as if it's close enough, you'll see it as a crescent or as a half shape, and you'll think to yourself, well, I never even knew that before. And of course, if you see it at the other end of its, you know, flip this picture if you like, the crescent works the other way, because always the light comes from the sun. And Venus has quite a few things that it does. It has kind of like two full Venuses. But anyway, that's what I mean by phases of Venus. Okay, so what do I mean by Lucifer and Hesperus? By Lucifer, or Phosphorus if you want it in Greek, it just means Venus rising before the sun. Here's a little bit of a horoscope. Here's the sun in the first house, and Venus has already risen before it. So if this was converted into real life, the sun would not have risen yet. There'd still be stars and darkness, and up would come this bright light, and it would be Venus leading the way for the sun. And of course, to bring the light is ferrolucium in Latin. So Lucifer is anger, phos is light in Greek, phoros is carrier, bringer. So phosphoros, yes, with an O if we're translating Greek, and Lucifer in Latin mean the same thing. They mean the bringer of the light. And that's all we mean by Venus Lucifer. This title of Venus Lucifer as an astrological concept is something which comes out, I think, from Dane Rudyard, and we'll get some more from him later on in the talk. And the picture is, of course, Alphonse Mouché's wonderful poster panel done around the turn of the 20th century, which is simply called Morning Star. And here she is, personified as a goddess, with the light of the new day shining from her. Okay, now it is true that if Venus comes up first, she is leading the way, leading the day, but also she is bringing metaphorical light, and indeed bringing metaphysical light, because she can be a symbol of a new life, not only a new day, but possibly even an incarnation, resurrection. This sort of thing is very much bound up in Near Eastern mythologies. So Venus Lucifer, Venus Phosphorus has a lot to do. At the other end of the day, Venus Hesperus means that the sun has set, is below the horizon, darkness is falling, but here in the west is this bright body, which is Venus, of course, some distance behind the sun. And of course, as time goes by, as the minutes pass, Venus herself will go below the horizon and set. So you only see her for an hour or two, but it's very, very noticeable. Even if it's not dark enough for the stars to have come out, you will see Venus in the evening, and I'm sure you know all that. Hesperus simply means western in Greek, and it translates into Latin without changing its spelling, apart from the U from the O, and so it means western in both cases. And this is Alphonse Mucha's evening star, and she's turning her face away, and the light is going down with her. These lovely, lovely panels. If you've ever seen the originals, they're really quite big. If you go to Prague, go to the Mucha Museum and see most of his works there. They're about the size of a small door, and they're really very impressive. Okay. Yes, let me just go back one. If you've got Venus Hesperus in a chart, you think to yourself, oh, it's a form of Venus in the 7th. Just as if you've got Venus Lucifer in a chart, you say, oh, well, it's going to be Venus in the 12th. So if Venus is in a position where it's rising before the sun, what does that mean? So you look it up, and what you get is, well, you get this. Venus in the 7th, the need to be socially active, grace and poise in dealing with others, happy in relationships, eager to marry, fortune through a partner. In the 12th, you get some racier stuff, clandestine relationships, compassionate, of service to others, fantasy love, impossible love, the need for seclusion, profit and joy in occult and psychic matters. You might recognize the third one in each of those as being taken from Alan Lee in the 1890s. The first one in each case is taken from Alan Oken in the 1960s, and the middle one is taken from Van Schaaf, the nice German textbook, which is actually from this century. So the thing with all of those is that what you've done is you've taken Venus as a nice benefic idea, and then you've blended it with the house meaning. It isn't saying anything about being in front of the sun, being behind the sun. Venus's phase, Venus's appearance, the fact that it is the only thing you can see in the sky at certain times of day, the fact that it stands out in the sky, close to the horizon, close to the sun, is not mentioned. It's just house meanings glued on. And I thought to myself, well, there's got to be more than that. You know, let's have a look and see what else we can find. Let's just have a look at this orbit, see what happens with it. This illustration is lifted quite cheerfully from Movement and Rhythms of the Stars by Joachim Schultz, which is one of the Steiner publications. It's quite elderly now, but it has some fantastic diagrams in it. So I've just pinched this. Seen from the Earth, if we could see, without the Earth in the way, the Sun and Venus going round at the same time that we're going round it, of course, then Venus will appear much bigger when it's between us and the sun than it will when it's on the other side, because it's further away. And it will, as it goes round, then more of its illuminated face becomes visible to us. I know this is obvious, but it's worth just running through. And this is called greatest elongation. And this is, of course, superior conjunction. And this is greatest elongation the other way. And what happens when you get to here is, I suppose you'd get new moon Venus, wouldn't you? New Venus. But what it is inferior conjunction. And because the sun is its way around the zodiac, taking Venus with it, and we are moving, well, actually we're moving this way round, but it's like the sun is moving that way round. We overtake Venus. So during this phase, just a few days each side of inferior conjunction, Venus is actually retrograde from Earth. Okay, so all of this, Venus is direct, sometimes faster than the sun, sometimes not. And just this little bit, Venus is retrograde. She's retrograde for 42 days in a period of about a year and a half, the least period spent in retrogression of any of the planets that we use in astrology. Okay, so she really does try not to be retrograde, but there are times when she just can't help it. And there are two other things. These things represent the time that's called greatest brilliancy, because this area of this crescent appears to us on Earth bigger than this area when Venus is on the other side of the sun. So therefore, in terms of how much light we see, even though here, for example, and here, Venus has more of its disk illuminated, we see it as being further away and therefore dimmer. What this phase is greatest brilliancy. And so we can think of that almost like full moon, if you like, except we get two of them. You get one here, and then we go to the retrogression and the inferior conjunction, and then we get greatest brilliancy the other way, and then off to greatest elongation and round the back of the sun. And the whole thing takes 500 and something days, as I'll tell you in a minute. Okay? However, we don't see it like that. We see it as two separate things. What you see first, after superior conjunction, is Venus appearing as an evening star in the west. It appears quite low on the horizon. Each day after the sun has set, it gets a bit higher, bit higher, bit higher, right up to the top until it gets to its greatest elongation. Now it's coming round the front, and yes, it is banana shaped, and the banana-ishness changes according to whether our orbit, the plane of the Earth's orbit around the sun and the plane of Venus's orbit around the sun are in an exact alignment to each other. In fact, yes, you have Venusian nodes, if you like, just like lunar nodes. And then when you appear to be about 2/3 of the way around this loop, you get maximum brilliance. And then it falls quite quickly, because by now the sun is moving faster through the zodiac than Venus is. So therefore Venus is no longer outpacing the sun. It falls quickly, and then for the last 10 days, it just vanishes because it's in retrogression. And then after a couple of weeks, you see the same thing happening as a morning star, only this time it's in reverse. Retrogression, then recovers itself, then maximum brilliance. Oh, really? The other way around? Yep. Then to greatest elongation, and then a nice, long, steady fall, or apparent fall, but actually what it's doing is that great big back loop far away round the back of the sun. But these seem to be two completely different phenomena. They are not, of course, but I think in astrology it is important that we should somehow see these things as being quite different. You know, there must be something about Venus when it's an evening star which we must interpret differently from Venus as a morning star. And I haven't found that in any of the books that I've been looking at. So I thought, well, let's just dig a little deeper. What have people said about it if you strip out of it all the stuff about in this sign it means, in this house it means? Because if you think about it, astrological symbolism simply takes the value of the planet, the appearance of the planet, the speed of the planet, the maleficity of the planet, if you like, and then makes a cocktail of that with the usual house meanings and the usual sign meanings, shakes it up, pours it out and says, how do you fancy drinking that? And if it's a flavour that you like, you say, oh yeah, I really like this guy, and you buy his book. And that's, if you think about it, how astrological interpretation and vocabulary is made. You can make your own from first principles, if you like, just like mixing cocktails. So anyway, oh yeah, let's just do a little bit of revision. So all the fancy stuff happens within 72 days, and you've got 500 days of more or less Venus just tootling along. Now, this 3 times 72 and 72 and so on, I'd like you to note that the entire sequence is 8 times 72 days, and 72 is 1/5 of the zodiac. So therefore, a Venus sequence is 1 3/5 zodiacs exactly. And what you get over a period of 8 years is 5 Venus sequences. Thus, it goes round 1 2/3, and then round 2/3, there's number 3, and then round again and 2/3, there's number 4, and then round again and 2/3, and that is 3/5, sorry, and there's number 5. And then at number 6, you are almost exactly back where you started. In fact, you'll find you're 2 degrees short, that's all. And so this lovely 5-point star, which has long been an emblem of Venus, is traced out by Venus constantly in its cycles through the heavens. It does 5 complete sequences of its phases in 8 years. And therefore the superior conjunctions occur at the same places all the time, just walking backwards very, very slowly. So if you were born on one at a multiple of 8 years, and whatever Venus phase you were at, you'll get another one just like you were born at it in the same signs on your birthday every 8 years. And it's such a neat cycle that the other half of it works the same way as well. And so here we have the inferior conjunctions occurring at the same degrees, just separated by half a cycle, 4 years. This is extraordinarily accurate. It's wonderful to watch Venus doing this. And, you know, if you've got an inferior or superior conjunction of Venus coming up during your, you know, the next few years of your life, the next few days, because it's secondary progression stay for a year, yeah. This is going to have quite some effect on you, I think. Venus's patterns are wonderful. And it is said that the reason an apple is known as the fruit of Venus and the, you know, the fruit of love is that if you cut an apple straight across its equator, so to speak, you get this pattern because it's a 5-fold fruit. If you cut an apple, you find it's got pips there, and there. Have a go with the next apple you try. The rose family is also a 5-fold plant, isn't it? That's right. So you get 5, yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Rose petals work in sequences of 5s the same. So how can we interpret these 2 different halves of Venus's cycle? Well, there's quite a lot on the web by Mayer, who is a disciple of Rudyard, and he suggests that those with Venus Lucifer, because it rises before the sun, have a spontaneous, eager and impulsive emotional nature. They feel and emote first, and the things that are in italics are direct quotes from it. And those with Venus Hesperus, where the sun leads the way round the skies and Venus follows, are more controlled and introverted, internally involved with their emotions. They have feeling after the fact because the sun gets there first. You know, the sun rises first and Venus follows. The sun culminates first, goes across the midheaven and Venus follows, and so on. So it's as though the action, which is the sun, is first, and then comes the feeling. And, you know, this is about the only thing that you will find that anybody's done, which is about seeing Venus as a phased object rather than just by its sign or its house position. So I thought, well, that's okay, but what he's really doing here is putting Rudyard's lunar cycle onto Venus, because, you know, Venus has crescents and full and so on and so forth, but he's not bringing out anything more specific than that. And I thought, can we go a bit deeper than this, please? So I started to go a bit further back. Well, the furthest back you can go is to see Venus as Inanna, or later Ishtar. She is the great goddess of love and war. Interesting idea. And here she is on an Akkadian seal, 2200 BC. So this one's 4,000 years old. She's got weapons on her back, very ninja style. She's winged, of course. She has a horned headdress on, and she is treading on a lion. She's usually accompanied by a lion, and nobody's entirely sure why. But what she is always accompanied by is an 8-pointed star. And we know what that 8 refers to. This is the star which comes back to the same place in the sky after exactly 8 years. Yes, it is. So here she is as a goddess of love and a goddess of war. And as various Mesopotamian and Near Eastern cultures succeed one another over the course of history, this goddess changes her name. She becomes Astarte after a while, and she feeds into the Greek Aphrodite and into the cults of Aphrodite in the Near East. But it's still essentially the same goddess. She has a lot to do with nature. She has a lot to do with seasonality, because she has, 9 months above, 9 months below. And she goes down to the underworld, a bit like Persephone does. She has a twin sister in the underworld, Ereshkigal, and she has a doomed lover, Dumuzi, who is sacrificed. And this has a lot to do with things like the John Barleycorn idea, where the young male is sacrificed only to rise again. He's the constantly reoccurring fertility and the spring as it grows, and then he is harvested, so to speak, and grows again the next year. But she has always had this dual nature. She is both a goddess of love and sexual attraction, although not necessarily of being a wife or a mother. She that goes to other goddesses, and she is notably unfaithful to poor old Dumuzi, and she's always got this idea of being a war goddess as well. So I'm wondering whether Venus is about how you relate to other people generally, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, whether you feel you need to be aggressive towards them, whether you can be receptive towards them. And it's this dual nature of Venus, which I think it gives her a lot more mileage than we normally attribute to her. And also, I think, has something to do with whether she's in the morning or whether she's in the evening. Rob Hand has got it more or less sorted in his little monogram Night and Day, which is about sect, the business of morning and of planets which are nocturnal and diurnal. And he says there are Babylonian sources in which the morning star and evening star Venuses are quite different. The morning star Venus being the warrior goddess aspect of Ishtar, with the evening star Venus being the love goddess aspect. And this distinction survives in diurnal and nocturnal Venus characteristics described by Maternus, as we will see in a couple of minutes. I'd rather hoped that Chris might be with us, Chris Mitchell, because he's the big expert on Babylonian stuff and I'm not. And I thought he might chip in here, but he's not here to my knowledge. If you are, Chris, please help me out here, because I can't read Babylonian texts and I know you study them with great depth. So I go back to Ptolemy. Ptolemy, as usual, has something to say. He says, they also say, I could murder him for this. Who, Ptolemy, who? Who is they that's doing the saying? And he just has this wretched Greek word "phasi," which means they say, which is exactly the way we use it when we say something that we don't really mean, but we're attributing it to hearsay or a source that we can't remember. Greek uses "phasi" in exactly the same way, and he says they say that the stars become masculine or feminine according to their arrangement with the sun. Those that are morning stars and precede the sun become masculine. The word in the Greek is arenesthai. And those that are evening stars and follow the sun become feminine. And the Greek is therinesthai. This is an interesting word, arenesthai. This AR bit, which is the root of it, is the same as you get in Aries, the planet Mars. And the Greek god of war. It's to do what men have to do, go out and defend the homestead and take weapons to the enemy and be brave and bold and bloodthirsty and all of that kind of thing. That apparently is ancient world masculinity, and to have that, to acquire that, this is simply the infinitive form of the verb, don't worry about it, is to be masculinized, to be manned. And those that are evening star means feminine, but it also means soft, gentle, those kind of things. And so there's a real change in the two roles, real contrast between the two roles, male and female. We're definitely dividing things into sexist quadrants of the sky here. Firmicus is basically playing the news of the world. He's got all sorts of bits and bobs. But he does say that Venus on the ascendant by day, well, it can't be already risen unless the sun has risen. It wouldn't be day. I think what he means is Venus really close to the ascendant, just introducing the sun. You know, the light of dawn has already come. But he says such people are oversexed, unchaste, and of ill repute. They will be linen weavers, embroiderers, or artists in paints, dyers, or tavern keepers. And these are people who have taken on Venusian roles, because Venus is all to do with what was seen as women's crafts, you know, weaving, needlecraft, the making of clothes, soft things, as opposed to metalworking, which is Mars's craft and is seen as what men do. And then, of course, tavern keepers are always of low status. And I just wonder whether that's to do with the 12th house, which has always got something to do with tavern keepers and with taverns and places where you stay where it's not your home. He says, but if Venus is even higher and it's in the 11th, oh, well, then the native becomes powerful at an early age, and men to whom great power is entrusted, so that by their merits they become friends of great men and emperors. This is a reference to people like freedmen in the ancient world, who are not aristocrats. They are free, and they're not slaves. That's why they're free, or that's how they're free. And they become advisors, a bit like special advisors to politicians these days. They're not elected, they don't have much responsibility, but they have enormous influence and power. And apparently, if you have Venus as a morning star, well up from the sun, so that you can see it right up into the 11th house, still before the sun has risen. That makes for men of great power, and yet there's this inference in it that they are friends of great men and emperors, but they don't have that nobility in them themselves. So Venus makes them a usurper. This is not terribly benefic. And I love the last one, sorry. The native with Venus in the 12th will be tormented with constant pain and greed for the sake of women. Venus overheats the mind and incites base loves. Some natives join themselves to slave women in marriage. Others associate with prostitutes on their own marriage couch, and for this reason are denied offspring. In other words, they are sowing their seed where they shouldn't, and then they have none for their wives, and they will not be able to continue their family line, which in the ancient world is hugely important. So Venus here as a morning star rising in place of the sun is not considered a good thing at all. And yet when it's an evening star in the 7th and following the sun, then you have it in a traditional feminine role, and he likes it a whole lot better. Venus in the 7th is in her own house by night. She predicts happy old age, though a late marriage. Good fortune is indicated by Venus as an evening star in a nocturnal chart. Venus with the sun in the 12th is very unjust. Yeah, you said that earlier. But she rejoices when she is behind the sun in a morning rising. In other words, the sun rises first and Venus is obediently 2 paces behind. And then whatever good fortune she has predicted from her favourable position is now increased. So no doubt where Firmicus stands on this then. Rob Hand again. Ancient writers thinking that the diurnal Venus behaved in a manner that was or to women either from the point of view of the ancients. When Venus is in a diurnal chart or diurnally placed in a chart, meaning it's still above the horizon and yet the sun has not yet risen, it indicates a strong kind of feminine sexuality, which in a traditional and patriarchal society would incline a female native towards immorality and lascivious behavior. In modern times, a woman who would have difficulty accepting the traditional woman's role in society. So, independent women. Han makes this point a little later on in his book, that these days he would expect it to be an assertive, independent woman. And in the chart of a male native, the ancients would have expected a diurnal Venus to indicate one who was soft, effeminate, and prone to sexual deviation. And we've already looked at Firmicus, what he has to say about that. And Hand also makes the point that perhaps these days a man with that would find independent, assertive women attractive. And we'll get to that in a bit when we have a look at some examples. But I'm thinking, well, that's all well and good, but I want a core value on which to hang those 2 Venuses. And it occurred to me that if you start off with the sun where he should be, near Leo, yeah, that you've got 2 Mercury signs here and 2 Venus signs here. So maybe as Venus goes back from the sun in the natural zodiac, it's reaching for its Taurian self. And then if it goes forward from the sun, it's reaching for its Libran self. So I thought, well, let's run with this and see if I can get anything out of it. Maybe this is the Taurian half, and maybe this is the Libran half. And that will provide us with some vocabulary on which we can then build some ideas. And I have to say, this is all me, and you can shoot me down in flames later. Let's have a look at the Libran half cycle then. From superior conjunction out along the back straight to elongation and then falling inwards. So starting from superior conjunction, a state of confidence and fullness. It's full because we're like full moon, full Venus, yeah? And it's conjoined to the major benefic. This half cycle shows the native reaching out. It's moving forwards and it's faster than the sun. It's reaching out beyond itself to another person, offering him or herself in partnership, reaching towards Libra. This is romance and relationship as they are usually perceived. So for all the people who for 9 months have got this, 9 months of the cycle were born with this, they're you know, what their Libra is doing, what their Venus is doing is acting towards romance, acting towards fostering relationships, helping them make relationships. The further from the sun, the stronger the need to relate, perhaps, as this becomes more and more prominent. Once greatest elongation is reached, Venus can no longer outpace the sun. And here I take a jump. The native may be spending more in emotional terms than he or she can afford. So greatest brilliancy could be seen where you are so much in love with another person that you are willing to reduce yourself so that you can have them. Of course, if you're giving out more than you're getting back, then you are exhausting yourself, and soon comes retrogression, a state of self-sacrifice for the sake of a relationship, leading eventually to emotional exhaustion and collapse. What about the other side? Well, starting from inferior conjunction, a state of total emptiness, this half cycle shows the native taking in nourishment, both physical and emotional, replenishing whatever was lost previously and whatever is felt necessary to restore health. So what he's after is comfort and security to rebuild himself. These are key Taurian concepts: comfort, security, nourishment. We're reaching, perhaps after heartbreak, we reach for the chocolate. This is a known antidote to heartbreak, is it not? And a Taurus would appreciate that. Whereas when you are in your Libran half, you don't need the chocolate, you have your love. Okay? Perhaps the further from the sun, the stronger the need again. During retrogression, and I might point out that you can never really see Venus retrograde because it's such a small part of its orbit and it's within sunbeams or hidden in the, below the horizon at the time that the sun has risen. So, it's something that happens in a very private area of Venus's envelope and is hidden from us. And I think there might be a reason for that too. I think it's rather nice. So during retrogression, it's just essential needs. When you reach greatest brilliancy, maybe the native has actually got enough, but is starting to accumulate more than is strictly necessary. So this is a point of conspicuous consumption. Often people will eat more than they need to, or they will buy themselves treats, or they will buy themselves luxuries and things like that, which they really don't need, but they feel the need because they were, they're born with it there, and they feel that no amount of things that they buy or treat themselves to can ever relieve that essential inner emptiness. And this overaccumulation continues until greatest elongation, and then there's no need for it. So therefore, this 9-month period is the bit where the Taurian Venus, as it were, the Venus behind the sun, can actually live without constantly trying to accumulate. I dare say it knows what it likes. It may well have finely developed taste, I think there's much more on material quality of life in this arc than there is in this arc. But it's not a desperate desire like it is in the beginning. So these bits between greatest brilliance and elongation are kind of critical, because in this one it's about acquiring things you don't really need, and on the other side of it, it's about sacrificing yourself and burning up energies that you don't really have. And so, you know, the fuel that is accumulated here is burnt there. Let's put both together. And here we are. This part, this half is all to do with being focused on others. This part is all to do with being focused. And if we start from being full and confident, this is about forming a relationship, which I've called sharing. And this is about overdoing the relationship and sacrificing yourself so it can continue, which I've called caring, only because sharing and caring rhyme. There you are at a point of emptiness. You have no Venus, you have no light. No light from Venus can come to us. Yep, because the sun's on the other side of it. And Venus is trapped between Earth and Sun. That's interesting, just for a day. This is all about needing. And because I couldn't have anything else to rhyme with, this is to do with feeding. But I want the idea here of the Taurian bull that is happy in its own field, knows what it's doing and is contentedly munching its grass, but also ready to defend its field against all comers, which Taurus always is. It doesn't always happen that you're reaching for Libra. It doesn't always happen you're reaching for Taurus because, of course, the sun isn't always in Leo. But these are just keywords on which we can build things. And that, I think, will give us something to go with. So armed with all of that, let's have it. Now, this is Penelope Cruz. Most of you know her as an actress, I think. And this is a chart that's got a time to it. And this is an extraordinary long reach from the sun to Venus. Venus is almost at maximum elongation. So this is about as far from the sun as you can get before it will start to lose altitude, so to speak, simply because what it will start to do is lose velocity. Okay, but this is really high up. So she's very, very prominent, and in Pisces, this will give a very rich lifestyle. I don't know anything about her personal life, and you'll see why I chose her in a minute. But wow, this is some elongation. That is a long way up. Have a look at the next one. And this is Javier Bardem, who is a Spanish actor and is Penelope Cruz's husband. You probably know him as the villain from the James Bond film Skyfall, but they have made many, many films in Europe and America, both as themselves, separately and together. They're a bit of a power couple. But he is this far away on the other side. Isn't it wonderful? Whatever else they have in terms of synastry, and you could go into that. She is as high as you can get on the Lucifer side, and he is as high as you can get on the Hesperus side. And I just think there's a yin in you, as well as all of the other things that you might want to charts and put them together. There is that as well. Their phases of Venus are complementary. It's like each of them is one half of that loop, and you can join them together and you can get a complete Venus cycle. And I just thought that was so cute. This is Barbra Streisand, who needs no introduction at all. Again, she is somebody who is right at the end of the Lucifer phase, and she tells many anecdotes in interviews who she was to start with, and her definition of how she knew she'd made it. One of the strangest is she once said that the definition of having enough is that you can buy a grapefruit and you can eat half of it now and put the other half by for later and know that it will sort of still be there for you in the tomorrow morning, which I thought was a bit strange. But what she was referring to was the idea that you had to eat what you got when you could get it. And that is real poverty. in recent years, she has created a full-sized artificial street of shops in the basement of her house, which has featured in magazines. So almost like a toy shop and a dress shop and a sweet shop and so on, in which she places all of her belongings, because she is an avid collector of things and never ever throws anything away. But what she has made for herself is a kind of psychological underworld where she can always have access to all the things that she felt that she'd never been able to have. And of course, now that she is a superstar and has been a superstar for decades and decades, the idea of returning to poverty is irrelevant. And yet that Venus placement will always make her want to have all of those things. And I thought that was quite interesting. Now, this is Elizabeth Taylor, and Elizabeth Taylor is another person like Javier Bardem who's got a really pronounced Hesperus, okay? But this time it's not actually in the 7th. And it seems that if you look at the ancient authors and work your way through the people who've been working with them, people like Rob Hand and so on, then it doesn't matter really where your Sun and Venus are. But if Venus is further ahead of it, it's still Hesperus, because on that day, you know, eventually on this day, the Sun will rise and Venus will trail behind it, and the Sun will culminate and the Sun will eventually set, and Venus will be doing it all behind it. So this is a Hesperus position. And what I liked about this is that perhaps if I said, as I said, that the further away the separation between the two of them, and this again is near the maximum of 40 something degrees, 46, 47. If you have that degree of separation, then seeking romance, seeking relationship becomes a big thing for you. And she was famous times, not least to Richard Burton. And I find it really quite touching that the Venus should be in such close conjunction to Uranus. So it's almost like marry, divorce, marry, divorce, marry, divorce. As soon as you've got one, you've automatically got the other. And I think that was that must have been something that she probably regretted. You know, does it have to be this way? But you know, if it brought her happiness. But people remember her not just for her luminous beauty, or for the fact that she was an Oscar winner, or that she was in what was at the time the most expensive movie ever made, although it's been eclipsed many times since. It's not a title that lasts long, isn't that particular one, most expensive movie. But we remember her for her constant marriages and divorces and all the rest of it. So there we go. That's that. And let's just have a look at another one, shall we? Now, here is a late Lucifer, Elton John, a man who is a known shopaholic in a way. He's a known person who acquires good things. He likes good things. He lives well, fine collection of cars, fine collection of houses, fine collection of everything, really. And always has been a flamboyant collector, a man who lives life very richly. And his Venus, because it is so far back, is in that zone that I said was near the point of conspicuous consumption. Now, it looks like Hesperus because Venus is on this side, but remember, it is before the Sun in the zodiac. So when that day dawned, Venus came up first and was up well before the Sun, which trails it by a whole sign and some. That is quite a chunk. So what about nice people? Well, I mean, we're all nice, aren't we? The majority of us, the vast majority of us, do not have Venus and the Sun in this critical position. Most of us have Venus some way behind the Sun or some way in front of the Sun. It's only when you've got it right at the ends that you really start to see things that are a bit strange, or when you got it conjoined, or when you got it retrograde, then you start to see some strange things coming out. So let's have a look at two who were born at the conjunction. This is Oprah Winfrey, and she is born at the superior conjunction. And as you can see, the difference between them is a mere 8 minutes of arc. What makes her prominent on the world stage, so to speak, is the Neptune at the top. And I suppose what gives huge power to her is the loose opposition of Pluto to all of this stuff. But these two are together, and no mistake. So this is a person who is full in every sense. She knows who she is. She has that inner calm, she has generosity, she has love enough to give to other people, and that's what we see her as. You know, we've seen her as a kind of a mother confessor. We've seen her as a person who gives care to other people, you know, and allows them to a space in which they can unburden themselves and all the rest. And so there is the confidence that comes with somebody who has the Sun and Venus conjoined. I have met quite a few people in my life who, three in fact, I'm related to some of them, who have had the Sun and Venus very, very close like that. And they are unfailingly pleasant people. I've not met Oprah Winfrey. I know only from what I see on the television. But people who have the Sun and Venus really close like that, they seem to be entirely happy in themselves. There is no stress with them at all. Now, my next example, I have to say I know nothing about other than searching through a pile of celebs to find the particular astrological configuration. So I make no real comment about President Macron's wife, Brigitte, who is mainly known for being a whole lot older than he is. But that shouldn't make any difference in the modern world, although it is worth noting in their synastry, and you can't find many couples who have this, that they have their Uranuses in trine. Wow, now that is an age gap. But this is the thing to look at here. Here is Venus, inferior conjunction within a degree, retrograde, and it's being closed in by a very weak moon, which is closing on the Sun. Now, according to my theory, this should mean somebody who is in severe need of emotional nourishment. Possibly, you know, doesn't have anything to give, or what they have is very, very closely guarded because they have already given all that they had previously, maybe in previous relationships, maybe in previous lives, I don't know. Her prominence probably comes from this, which is a very difficult conjunction as far as, handling your emotions goes. Here's your dreams and here they are crushed. Or here's the things you rely on, and there they are being swept away from under you. Anybody born in the early 50s has got this, but to have the opposition, and this so tight, so very, very tight, I really don't know what to say about it other than that here is an example of somebody who is in the public eye, and they have this almost invisible. It would not be possible to see this even on a clear night and all the rest of it. And even if you were right there looking at the horizon for it to happen, you couldn't see this. You couldn't see the moon like that. You couldn't see Venus, this triple conjunction. It would actually be invisible. So therefore, whatever this is, it is invisible to us. But I am absolutely sure that it drives her, just because it's the two lights and that very, very weak Venus. I mean, it's combust. It's in a detriment, it's retrograde. I mean, how much weaker do you want it to be? It's an extraordinary thing. And my last example, oh no, it isn't. My next to last example, here's another weak Venus. I'm not going to grace Hitler by putting a picture of him up, and besides, you know the horoscope all too well, I'm sure. Here we have Venus as a proper Hesperus, but it is extremely weak. It is falling down and will fall down very fast to join that Sun, which will rise to meet it within 10 days after birth. It's retrograde, and unfortunately, it falls into the arms of Mars, which is, coming to get it. And in fact, they are already conjunct. And then the pair of them square this grim Saturn in the 10th. So whatever emotional emptiness, emotional neediness, emotional exhaustion this represents, there is a strong will for power here, and the pair of them are burnt, really sacrificed, if you like, as fuel to this Saturn at the top. Very well-known horoscope, but a very, very afflicted Venus, not happy at all. Despite what Firmicus says, there is not much good fortune or kindness in this. And my final example, and I am a great admirer of Catherine Cambridge, she also has Venus retrograde in the Hesperus position, already falling in towards the sun. And I'm just wondering whether she will sacrifice her own emotional fuel and well-being for the sake of, presumably, the monarchy, her husband, and of course her children, to whom she is devoted, or perhaps even to the nation. She is going to take on a great deal of responsibility when she becomes queen in about 10 or 20 years' time, however long it is. And I just hope that she has strong enough shoulders to bear it. She's a full moon person, and the moon is next to the North Node. And of course, that is what gives her her destined position, if you like. And since at the time she was born, the only thing you could see would have been the moon, and it's in Cancer, the only thing we will see of her is as this mother figure, this archetypal figure, this more than human figure, because being at the North Node, it's a position that is part of our collective destiny. So she will indeed be queen. And it's so, you know, if she wasn't somebody's wife, she wouldn't have that position, because she won't be queen in her own right. She's queen because she's going to be married to the king. But this concerns me, because I just think she might be taking on too much and working herself too hard. Okay, and there, pretty much on time, I'm done.
Okay, Bernard, thank you very much for that. And it's yes, it's an interesting way of looking at Venus, and also something that I kind of feel would have a much longer pedigree than the sort of stuff we tend to do, is sticking a planet in charts and houses, because it's also about visibility. What you can see.
Absolutely, it is about visibility. Yeah.
And yeah, so I think we just clarified in the chat that you can tell if the Sun-Venus conjunction is an inferior one. It's because Venus... Because
it's retrograde. Yeah. That's right. Yeah, superior, it's always direct. Inferior, it's always retrograde.
And a question that's also come up is about, just the conjunction to the Sun generally. Says is Venus in the heart of the Sun and thus protected, which and it's kind of, in a way, I agree with what you say about the Sun-Venus conjunction. Those people seem to be very happy with themselves, but that also may be the idea of combustion. And
yet, if we were at a slightly different angle, and if you couldn't see the Sun, you might be able to see the fullness of the Venus. You know, if you had an astronomical telescope from which you had a solar, a mask, so to speak, so that you weren't looking at the envelope of the Sun, but you could see things beyond it and near it, and a big telescope can do that, then you would be able to see Venus beyond and up a bit from the Sun, and there it would be fully illuminated.
And there's also a question about the degrees from the Sun, because you're talking about critical degrees. What sort of, in those very extreme examples?
More than 30 degrees away, basically, and maximum elongation is 47 degrees, but depending on each individual cycle, it can be between 44, 45, 46. But I think once you've got more than, say, 35, 36 degrees, those last 10 or 12 degrees, I think they are the crisis points. You know, those are where you're in a position of either sacrifice or conspicuous consumption, as I called it.